Welcome everyone to this very exciting matchup between Indian IM Nubairshah Shaikh and India number 1 D Gukesh. The game starts off with knight to f3. Nubair's rating is 2432 while Gukesh is 2758. Gukesh is currently world number 8 and one of the best players in the world. It will be exciting to see how they face off against each other. D4 has been played, knight f6 comes out, and now Nubair plays his pawn up to g3. What does Gukesh do now? Well, he thinks for a bit and he pushes his pawn to b5. Very interesting move by Gukesh because Nubair was trying to delay c4 in the Catalan so that Gukesh doesn't get an opportunity to take here, but Gukesh has now stopped c4 with b5, and now Nubair has struck at the queen side with a4. Gukesh pushes forward his pawn, and now Nubair plays his pawn up to c4. Very interesting chess going on. This is slightly unusual. It's not mainline theory, but it's an exciting position to analyze. Now Black takes on c3. That's an en passant that Gukesh has done there. He takes it, and now Nubair can take back with the pawn, or I think in the opening you must develop your pieces, so taking with the knight makes a lot of sense. He takes, knight takes c3, and you can see Nubair making his moves pretty quickly. He has 132 minutes almost on the clock, which is pretty interesting with Gukesh playing slightly unusual line. Nubair is unfazed. e6 played here, and now bishop comes out to g2. The bishop would stand well on this diagonal. However, the problem is this is a very, very strong sort of formation, and it can be further strengthened by the c6 pawn. Gukesh now goes knight to d7. Maybe one of his ideas is to play c5 at the right time, and that's the reason why the knight comes to d7. And now white castles it out here. So Gukesh is thinking what exactly should he do. Is playing c5 a possibility? He would then be lagging in development somehow, and also his dark squares would get weakened. So he first plays bishop a6. Again, this is a quite an ambitious move, but also makes use of the pawn moving ahead in the opening. The bishop is well placed. Nubair puts his bishop on f4 and tells Gukesh that your c-pawn could become a weakness. Gukesh plays his pawn up to c6 and maybe wants to play his rook to c8. Yes, queen c2 played, and now rook would come to c8. Yes, the c6 pawn is a weakness on an open file. Rook c8 played, but at the same time it does a very critical job of limiting the white pieces. Rook to d1 by Nubair, and I think one of his ideas is to put the rook opposite the queen and dissuade Gukesh from going c5 ever. Bishop b4. Gukesh actively develops his bishop there on the b4 square, putting pressure on the knight. Knight comes out to e5. That is interesting because knight e5, and now if Black takes here, how is Nubair going to take back? Because if he takes with the pawn, knight d7, like look at this, take. Black is doing really well in this position, no real problems. So actually Gukesh can consider taking on e5, and he does exactly that. He takes the knight, and now Nubair has to decide whether to take with the pawn or the bishop, because both do not look very appetizing. With the bishop, if you take, it's just a bishop that is doing nothing much in the center of the board. He takes it with the bishop, and I think it's a good idea to now quickly castle it out. I think the opening has ended very much in Gukesh's favor. The reason for that is because the bishop on g2 currently is not activated. It's hitting these central pawns which are very strong for Black, and Gukesh moves away from his chair, letting Nubair think here what is the way in which he wants to continue. And one of the plans is to just kick away the bishop with knight a2, but then the knight is misplaced. He goes e4. Whoa, what a move there. Because if you take here, I believe there is an idea of taking on f6, queen takes f6 and queen takes c3 when white is doing pretty fine there. And so that's the reason why after e4 he goes knight to h5. And what exactly this move does is that it threatens f6 when the bishop has to go to f4 and the knight will take it off. So Nubair now goes knight a2 and tells Gukesh, your bishop is hanging here on b4. So first save it, and I think Gukesh has to save that bishop. It has to move back. Bishop e7 makes the only sensible move here. I think there's nothing else to be done. But he is thinking a bit. Well, yes, bishop goes back to e7. And now, in order to meet f6, I think it's important to attack this knight. And that too with the bishop here would be very important. Because the queen cannot go here and attack. The bishop is already controlling that square. So he goes bishop f3. Good move by Nubairshah Shaikh here. And now knight has to move back. Knight f6 has to be played. And somehow Gukesh, through moving his bishop back and forth, knight back and forth, seems to have gotten a position where Nubair has to make a decision with his central pawn. If you ever take here, that is already catastrophic because the rook opens up, there are no more weaknesses and black is clearly better. So you can't let this tension dissolve in the center. And that's the reason why he comes back with his knight here on c3. And he's hoping that Gukesh takes here, because then after knight takes e4, this pawn is weak and the bishop suddenly is breathing life in the position. So that's the reason why this structure should not be disturbed for the time being for black. And that's what Gukesh knows. That's the reason why he goes knight back to d7. And he asks Nubair, what do you want to do with your bishop here? I'm planning to take it off on e5. Well, I think the only logical move for Nubair now is to move his bishop back to f4. He has 52 minutes on the clock. He does that. Gukesh has 54 minutes. Then bishop comes back. Now one move that black is absolutely not afraid of is white pushing the pawn to e5. That would be a positional blunder, because then black can go c5, and you can see there Gukesh playing queen b6. Let's just imagine you push the pawn. After c5, this is already a lost position for white because black's pieces come to life. So Nubair, of course, understands all of this. He's not just an IM, he has two grandmaster norms. So he quickly goes rook b1, and this is an excellent move by Nubair. He wants to play b4 and then stop c5 plans, later push e5. Rook d8 by Gukesh does not make so much sense because his opponent's idea was b4, so maybe coming here bishop b4 would have been better. But with rook d8, now Nubair goes b4, and you cannot take this pawn at all because knight a2 means that you're going to lose material here. c5 doesn't work because then the d5 pawn is loose. So all in all, it doesn't make sense to take the pawn. Bishop comes to c4. Gukesh still playing his moves calmly, but there could come a situation where black is completely suffocated, and that is what Nubair wants to do. He first goes a5, attacks the queen, and now the queen has to move. There are not too many options. One of them is to go to a6, the other is to go back to b7. These are the only two moves. Look at how this bishop controls this very important and beautiful diagonal. And here, after some thought, now Gukesh decides to move his queen. Where exactly? He's taking his time and he plays queen a6. He puts his queen on a6 square. And now Nubair's e5 move would not be so senseless already. Although after rook b8 there is still some pressure on the b4 pawn. So Gukesh is still hoping for Nubair to play e5 in the position. But I think Nubair is also very smart. He's not taking a call and he plays this excellent move h4. Very nice chess. He's keeping this tension alive and he's hoping that someday he can push his pawn to h6 and create further weaknesses on black's king side. For Gukesh, again, it's such a battle of both players waiting, and now he plays knight f6. This is provoking a bit too much. Gukesh knows that playing e5 might help him structurally, but now he's going to waste two moves to just force it. And you can see there Nubair shaking his head. He knows that e5 might be positionally not so great, but in this particular situation, it works out perfectly for him, because after e5, now the knight has to move, and that is going to be played. I think knight d7 is the only move, because if you play knight e4, that's already going to lose material. So he goes knight d7, and now comes a very important move if Nubair can find it, because this is black's good bishop. It is looking here. This is white's bad bishop. It's limited by its own pawn. So if he plays bishop g5, black has to trade it. Once you trade it, you are left with no real attack on the b4 pawn. Also c5 can't be played. So can Nubair find this positionally excellent move here? That is the question. He has 33 minutes to figure this out. It's not a tactical idea. It's a very subtle positional move, and often such moves are not easy, but he finds it. Bishop g5 played. Fantastic chess by Nubairshah Shaikh. He's really putting the pressure on India #1 Gukesh. And you can see there Gukesh looking as calm as one could be, but deep within he knows that he's in real trouble here. Now either you take here, but that would be bad because hg, king moves up and the rook can swing over taking the open file, or you just maybe go rook e8 and defend your bishop. I think that is the lesser of the two evils there. And you can see there Gukesh really stopping in his tracks, and now going rook e8. For Nubair, now taking the bishop and clamping down on the c5 square makes so much sense. Knight a4 to knight c5. But also, yes, first he takes, that is logical chess. Rook takes, and now how do you continue in this position? It's not like white has a direct winning advantage. Should you go and trade these bishops on e2? You know, then it might be that that's a good trade-off. Or you want to keep these bishops. Maybe you want to first move your knight to c5. The other idea is maybe you want to push your pawn to h5. But before all of that, Nubair simply moves his queen to d2. Maybe the queen could be useful here. Also, it just comes out of this pressure down the c file that is there. A very logical move. I think Gukesh needs to think very seriously about f6 break, because if you don't have the c5 break, you want to go f6. But after ef6, knight f6, this pawn can become weak. So he actually is trying to build it up with rook f8. And he's saying to Nubair that I will go f6 if you are not careful, and then I will get my deserved counterplay because my bishop is well placed, queen is okay, knight can join in, and the rooks as well. So what does Nubair do? With 17 minutes on the clock, he finds this excellent move, rook e1, and he tells Gukesh, if you play f6, your e6 pawn will be weakened. So if you go here, I will take, and then if you take with the rook, I will play my bishop to g4, attacking here. Next move, I will go f4 and clamp down the central structure. Whoa, it's a very, very nice war and battle going on for the move f6 in the position. Will Gukesh play it or not? I think good or bad, maybe Gukesh should do it. No, he waits another move. He goes queen b7. But now, Nubair has an amazing plan. His knight is not doing much right now. One idea, as always, was to go here. But actually, he finds another plan, knight d1. I love it because he's going to e3. He's attacking the bishop. And then the knight could shift to g4, where it can look at these squares and Gukesh can get no counterplay there. With 14 minutes on the clock and move number 28, things are also looking time-wise okay for Nubair. And you can see there Gukesh is hesitating. He knows that f6 needs to be played at some point, but he's not happy with the resulting position. So he's just keeping status quo right now, and he's moved his queen to c7. What does Nubair do? He plays his bishop to g4 once again, stopping f6. But actually it's not really stopping, because after f6, ef6, you can go knight f6, giving up a pawn and trying to hope for counterplay this way. No, he doesn't go there. He goes bishop b5, and Nubair plays rook to c1. He improves his rook's position. And what does Gukesh do next now? It has been a waiting game for quite some time. Both players moving back and forth. He goes queen to d8. And I think what Gukesh is waiting for is for Nubair to take some steps in this position. What is his step? And I think Nubair also waiting for Gukesh's f6. Both players are not really ready to commit right now, and I think that really keeps the pressure mounting. This time Gukesh has thought already for 6 minutes for this move, and now what is he going to decide here? He's taking his time. He goes queen e8, maybe just defending this. Also after f6 the queen can get activated on these squares. That could be an idea there. And Nubair now plays his knight to c3. The knight goes back. It had actually come from here, but now it has gone back to c3, attacking the bishop. Maybe you need to move the bishop. Bishop c4 could be an idea here, just moving it away. But then there is this very nice move, knight e4, looking at the d6 square. If you take, I take this with a winning advantage there. Whoa, you can see how Nubair is sharp with his tactics. Even a small change with the queen not being on a6 and being on e8 means that these tactical opportunities exist. So Gukesh takes his time. He also doesn't want to land in a situation where his bishop is taken and the c file opens up, where he's just very ill prepared, because the rooks will enter the 7th heaven and then the other rook will join in. There will be tripling down the c file and black will be ultra passive in this position. So Gukesh really needs to save that bishop and avoid knight takes b5 from happening. So he must move the bishop, but where? Bishop c4 doesn't make sense, and that's the reason why bishop a6 is played. He moves his bishop back to a6, but now the c6 pawn is under some pressure. Rook e3 played by Nubair. Again, a nice little move, because this rook is not revealing his intentions. It could go to c3 if the knight moves, and if black ever goes f6, then after takes, this move, rook could go to e1 and you could launch a lot of pressure on e6 square. So it's a very multi-purpose move played by Nubair. Until now, I would say that Nubair has played at an extremely high level in this game. Knight goes back to b8, and somewhere Gukesh is hoping that his knight could get activated from a6. He could move this bishop somewhere, and knight a4 offering a draw there in a completely better position. I think Gukesh should simply take that draw offer, because this is actually a good thing for him to do. But we all know what a fighter Gukesh is, and it could be very much possible that he wants to play on. He plays bishop to b5 in a bad position where his opponent has offered a draw. Is that a wise decision, or it's over ambitiousness? Well, only time will tell. For the time being, Gukesh is believing in himself more than his position. He goes bishop b5 and attacks here, and now the knight can either come back to c3 or can go to c5. What is he going to do? Nubair could actually repeat already. Knight c3, bishop has to move, then knight a4, and could be a draw. But also Nubair may want to play for a win. No, he goes knight c3, and once again actually Gukesh can go bishop a6, knight a4, bishop b5, and they can repeat the position. But will he do that? I think for Gukesh it's important to continue. That ambitiousness is what has got him to 27-58, and perhaps that is what is going to keep him going here in this position. He goes rook b7, but positionally it's an extremely dubious decision. Why? Because now Nubair can take this bishop. If you take with the pawn, then this file opens up. I can go rook c3, and this is looking very dangerous with the rook on c file. If you instead take with the rook, then after bishop f1, well, he's taken it. He's taken this. Good move. And I think Gukesh cannot take with the pawn. That's a bad move. But also taking with the rook has its own drawbacks. And I think he must, he takes with the rook. And now bishop f1 seems like a cool idea, because yes, the c6 pawn is weakened, but it's protected. But white can at the right time push b5, open things up on the c file. Let's see if Nubair finds a way to break through, because Gukesh is completely tied up at the time. At this moment, his rook is misplaced, his other rook is not in the game, he's nowhere ready to break with f6, his knight is passive defending c6, but the only thing that's working for him is his attitude. He doesn't want to draw, he wants to fight on. And look at Nubair's time, he's down to 2 minutes, but we are already on move number 36, so only 44 more moves to make. He goes bishop f1, rook b7, and after those 4 moves are made, you will get 30 extra minutes on the clock. So now, how do you break through is the big question. One idea is to think about h5, h6. That is definitely possible, and I think Nubair can go h5 here. The other idea is to maybe think about f4, f5. That's also a possibility. The third idea, and that could be to put rook on b3, the other rook on b1, and try to engineer the b5 breakthrough, and then use your space there. And he's going for this third idea with rook b5. That seems rook b3. He wants to play b5 at the right time. Well, for Gukesh, perhaps b5 is not such a big problem, because it will help him at least to gain some active chances. For the time being, his knight is completely passive. It can't go here, it can't go here, because c6 would be hanging. So it goes g6, and now with g6, white can actually break with h5 in this position. Yes, Nubair playing on both sides of the board. Pressure on the queen side to push b5, pressure on the king side with h5. Well, Gukesh technically is lost already. Queen e7 played. He's hoping that some pressure here will make Nubair reconsider. Nice move to reach move number 40. King g2. What could be better than to improve the king position? Later, the bishop could move away and the rook could join in the battle with rook h1. And now Gukesh considers it high time to break one f6. But is the timing correct? Because now Nubair has got 30 minutes on the clock. He takes on g6, and now h takes g6 has to be taken back. Gukesh very likely is going to do that. He might take back on g6. He takes his time. 21 minutes for Nubair, so he thought for around 9 minutes before making this move. Gukesh has 33 minutes on the clock. Let's see what the move is going to be here. I think Gukesh is essentially thinking about maybe not taking back. Perhaps there is some intermezzo he can do with fe5. No, he takes back. Now, one thing is, if you were to take here, it does create some opportunity with queen f6, because now you can triple down the f file. So that's the reason why Nubair goes bishop d3, and he tells Gukesh that I'm attacking your pawn here. If you play f5, then you are just very passive here. So Gukesh says, I don't care about this g6 pawn. Take it if you want. I'm taking on e5. If you now take on g6, then already queen f6, attacking the bishop and pressurizing here and here is better for black. I mean, black is completely fine here. So Nubair must take back on e5. He has a nice position here and he can do it. Yes, he takes on e5. Good move. D takes e5 played. And g6 is a weakness. So how do you protect it? If you go queen g7 here, then already the queen enters. It's attacking here. Rook is beautifully placed. So Gukesh here plays knight d7, and you can see how a 2750 GM defense. He's attacking the e5 pawn, and he's telling Nubair, if you take here, I will take this and I will be getting active play. So Nubair plays f4. I love this move that Nubairshah Shaikh has played, because he's now controlling the central structure, and now this is a big threat. Whoa, Gukesh does not even care about it. He's like, take it. If you want it, take it, because I am getting my play on the queen side. So Nubair can actually take this pawn. He does it. He takes the pawn. C takes b4 is actually a pretty terrible move, because after rook h1, queen e2, queen h5 or queen g4, it's already a winning position for white. So he pushes his pawn to c4. Now the rook is hanging here, but you need to save it. Maybe rook b1 is the correct decision. Yes, he plays his rook back to b1. For the time being, white is clearly a pawn up and has a completely winning position. Nubairshah Shaikh has played wonderfully well. I would say the only subpar move that he's made in this game is offering a draw. Apart from that, everything has been just phenomenal. B4 pawn is attacked, but now he can actually go on a kingside attack with rook h1. Excellent move. If you were to take the pawn on b4, rook h7 is game over, because the queen has to defend this as well as this. So both cannot be defended and it's completely losing. So you cannot allow rook h7. You need to stop it. Knight f8 played by Gukesh, stopping rook h7 and also attacking the bishop on g6. The bishop has to move back, but where exactly? I think bishop c2 is a nice move, and then after rook takes b4, rook takes b4, queen takes b4 might be played. So instead, Nubair makes this amazing decision of playing f5, because if you take here, now the rook is once again ready to enter h7. So you cannot really take that bishop. Whoa, what a decision there by Nubairshah Shaikh. He's played f5. It's a very tough move to play, but with just 2 minutes 40 seconds, he's managed to find it and he's played it. Notice, if you were to take e takes f5 here, then the d5 pawn would be hanging. Also the f5 pawn looks weak, but at the same time, you don't want to allow f6 to be coming into this position. So what exactly should Gukesh do? You can see there, Gukesh does look a bit worried in the position, and he naturally should be. His position is just terrible. He cannot really be calm anymore, but that's one of his strong suits. He's able to keep cool, keep calm, just like Mahendra Singh Dhoni, the famous Indian cricketer whom Gukesh really enjoys watching. Now, where does he go? I think the best move here is to play e takes f5, because if you take on b4, there are f6 plans in the air. So e takes f5, and then you just hope that your opponent somehow goes wrong, because then bishop f5 is just completely crushing in the game. We will see what first Gukesh does, because here knight g6 is also an option. It's 6 minutes 48 seconds left for Gukesh, 2 minutes 47 seconds for Nubairshah Shaikh. Well, one of the things that is happening here is that after e takes f5, Gukesh can hope that Nubair takes this pawn, because then comes queen e6 and you have to trade queens and you go into an endgame where there are some chances of survival. But the winning move here for white is to play bishop takes f5. And the point here is that after queen takes e5, you have this amazing move, rook h5, or you can even begin with queen check, queen g7 and queen h5. Then bring your rook over and attack here. It's actually a bone crushing advantage. Well, after a long think here, he's taken on f5 and Nubair must take bishop f5. Bishop takes f5 is just crushing the position, because then rook h4, rook g4, queen can move in, the other rook can join, but no, he goes queen d5, and this is not a good move, because now the queens are forcibly getting traded. Yes, you would be happy as white if king g7 is played, because after bishop f5 you are winning, but queen e6, Gukesh finds it. This is an excellent move. Queen e6, the queens need to be traded. Yes, on one hand, your risk of losing this game is gone as white, because the queens are traded, but on the other hand, your chances of winning have also been reduced, because now after bishop f5, yes, you are 2 pawns up, but here's the move that Gukesh had been banking on. The move is knight to d4 to attack the bishop and also the pawn on b4. You can't protect both of them, and that is exactly what Gukesh does. He attacks the bishop on f5 and asks Nubair what is his plan. The best move here is rook f1 with the idea of trying to attack this king here, but in fact Nubair goes bishop e4 and Gukesh instantly takes the pawn on b4, recovering one of his pawns. Now Nubair plays bishop d5 check, king g7, and you can see that the position has become equal. Gukesh, such an amazing turnaround that he's made here from a totally losing position. In just 5 moves, he's reached equality, and that just shows that as a practical player, Gukesh is very tough to beat. You can actually say that engine was saying a +6 advantage to white, but it was not the easiest of variations to play. Rook takes b4 played, and now, yes, white is a pawn up, but somehow the pawns are weak. a5 is slightly weak, e5 is slightly weak. So all of these problems are going to cause some trouble. Rook c1 played by Nubair here, and now I think rook b5 is just the most clean equalizer, because e5 is hanging, a5 is hanging, both the pawns cannot be saved easily. And Nubair now, oh, look at how Gukesh played that move, rook b5. He just touched the rook with his fingers, showing to Nubair that no longer is he worse. Bishop takes c4, and now do you take the pawn on a5 or do you take the pawn on e5? Both the moves are possible and lead to an equalish situation. He takes the pawn on e5, and now the a5 pawn is under attack. Maybe you can save it with the move a6, but he goes rook d1. And maybe his idea is that once the knight moves, there will be rook d7 check and he can pick up the a7 pawn. But the problem is that after knight f5, there's a check that could make you lose the bishop. And that's the reason why here Nubair is no longer winning. You can see that he's getting a bit nervous there. He was totally better, but now no longer so. He goes rook d7 check. No, you don't want to exchange the rooks, because this endgame could become dangerous. And so let's keep the rooks on the board. Let's bring the king up. King f6 is correct. No longer can you take rook takes a7 because of knight e3 check. And so he must actually save his bishop. Once he saves it, then this is hanging. So he goes bishop a6. But now rook takes a5 is hanging, and Gukesh takes the pawn. Nubair also will capture the pawn on a7. White is a pawn up, that is true, but it's not much. Also, the knight can sacrifice itself and lead to a theoretical draw. But why to do that? You know, you can just play simply, calmly. This is a nice pin. Knight e3 check played, and maybe he's just going for the knight coming back to d5. Yes, king f2, and now the knight wants to go to d5 and b4 and try and win this bishop. So 60 moves have been completed, and now what is Gukesh going to play in this position? I like the fact how Gukesh always is very calm and he takes stock of his possibilities even in this completely drawn endgame. He plays his knight to d5. Knight comes back to d5, and the threat is of course a massive knight b4, which would then lead to some trouble there. So he must take care of this problem, Nubair, and one way to do it is play rook a8 perhaps. No, he goes rook h7, and his idea is that if you take here, he wants to give a check and pick up the rook. So rook a2 check played, and now king goes back to e1, and already there are multiple checks that will flow in this position. Check on a1. Well, you can go king d2, but he goes king f2, and now rook a2 check, and I think the players are going to agree to a draw. Gukesh no longer winning here. Nubair also seems to have given up his hopes to win here in this position. King f2, and the players I think are going to agree to a draw. Rook a2 check played. They agree to a draw. What an interesting game this was. Nubair was completely better. You can see him shaking his head there. Gukesh knows that he's dodged a bullet in this game and could have started the Qatar Masters with a loss, but now a draw is a fine result for him after what the position was like. But really, hats off to Nubairshah Shaikh for playing a wonderful game of chess. When the pressure became too high, he just couldn't find the winning path. The players do not exchange too many. Oh, there he is, Nubair, asking Gukesh what he should have played there. But I think, yeah, even Gukesh knows that he was totally lost. A wonderful game, pitting a super GM against an IM.